spending your lunch hour with me. What I thought we would do today is probably three things. Reflect, really try and get under the skin of what is going on out there. Reframe, okay, now that we know this, and retool. And we're going to have a bit of a practice. We've only got an hour together, so normally even some of these things we would spend a lot of time on. But I want to set some, start setting some seeds for understanding some of what we know is happening around women in leadership. And hopefully we can get some conversations going as well. So, a bit of a conversation about progression. I'm going to talk about the old double bind. Many of you will know what that is. Have a conversation around what do we do with this as women leaders. And then, in terms of the reframing, how might we move from a dilemma mindset to a paradox mindset, and what might that give us as leaders? And as I said, we're going to be reflecting, reframing, and retooling. So what's the issue? No one needs to make the business case anymore. 20 years ago, everyone was going, oh, what's the ROI of gender diversity? Those days are so done. There's not a chief executive I speak to now, male or female, who just is pulling their hair out that they cannot bring their talented women through into more senior executive ranks. No one's doing the business case anymore. That is done. If anything, that there is a huge opportunity cost to organizations because they believe that they need to be throwing the net out as widely as possible to their high potential people. And so what sort of happened is that, kind of thought it was all done 20 years ago. So what's the stickiness? What's going on? And we need to really understand and get some good insight into that so we can respond intelligently to what this new world is asking of us. So the progression is really, really low. And so people are starting to go, well, what's going on? Maybe women don't want to be leaders. They're not ambitious enough, they have kids, they're not confident enough, maybe they're not good enough. And so there's been a lot of what's going on. In the development space, which is the world that I'm in, I hear a lot of this. Okay, we just need to teach women how to be better negotiators, teach them to be more confident, more politically savvy, and work on their visibility. And if we could just fix all these things, women would actually progress. And on the face of it, that looks fine. But the reality is, this is mistaking the symptom for the cause. And so I think we need to go under a level, and a lot of the research that's come out in the last 10, 20 years, even the neuroscience research, about really understanding, a much deeper understanding of second generation bias, unconscious bias, is enabling us to see a more nuanced picture. And the point of that is to say, okay, then what do we do about it? So, as Pamela said, I am from New Zealand originally. You can tell from my accent, so I thought maybe I'd tell you a story about sheep. And not rugby, just sheep. Wordsworth and his wife were walking one spring morning through the countryside, and the daffodils were out, and they were having a wonderful time. And they walked around the corner and they saw all these lambs. Wordsworth said, oh, lambs are just exquisite, they're beautiful. No wonder that they have always been an emblem of peace and innocence. To which his wife replied, they are delightful creatures, my dear, especially with mint sauce. And the point of telling you that is that I'm really interested in the mint sauce of leadership development. There's a lot of poetry out there. Leadership, even talking about leadership, is people think is a very sexy topic. But when it comes down to how do you develop good leaders, what tools can you actually give people to understand their best leadership self and to make that impact, I find it's often missing. But we need to start off with thinking, what's going on out there? First of all, do we understand the issue? What is the issue? One of the myths out there is around female ambition. They're just not ambitious enough. Really interesting data. Women start their careers with as much ambition as men, and ambition was basically calibrated by, I have a strong interest in progressing. I would like a more senior role. Having children does not make women less ambitious. Really interesting. They tracked it for over a decade. Women who had kids, women who didn't have kids. So it's not, I'm having kids, I've lost my ambitions. They couldn't get any significant shift between women who had children and who did not. So both men and women become less ambitious as we get older. But really interesting, women become much less ambitious, and their ambition is linked to their company, not their family status. So their experience of their organisation is throttling back or diminishing their ambition, which is, I really want to progress, I really did want that role. This is really interesting data. So that those companies who are making the least progression on gender diversity, look what happens to people's interest in progression, women's interest in progression. What I love about this is that for those who are doing, there's really no difference. There is no difference, no significant difference between men and women and their ambition levels when organizations are really focusing on this and making it a strategic initiative. What I love about this data as well, it just proves that women's advancement doesn't come at the cost of men. The men are benefiting as well, because people want to work in organizations that are diverse. So that's one myth that's worth putting to bed, that women don't have the ambition. Another one is confidence. And you hear this a lot. And a lot of the data shows that when as adolescents, there is a big gap between girls and boys in terms of confidence. By the time they are 23, it's gone. And this is recent data, very little difference between men and women by the time they get to 23. So again, men and women tend to enter their careers with the same level of confidence. Within 2 years of their working and organisational experience, women's confidence drops to half that of the men. Half. 2 years experience of working. And interestingly enough as well, the chance of promotion rises for a highly confident man. It's not significant for a highly confident woman. So again, what's going on? Same behaviour, not getting the same rewards. And again here, despite no visible confidence gap in the way high-performing men and women rated themselves, confident women were not influencing in the same way, and it was not influencing their career. So women's confident behaviour, again, not perceived, judged, or experienced in the same way. So those are sort of just two, the ambition-confidence thing. So what is going on? It's not about, and I think it's very important that we understand that in the development context, it's not about female failings. And that is often where we start. Just fix these girls. Fix the girls and yell at the boys. We've just got to be much more sophisticated than that if we want to make these shifts. So what's happening? Communal and agentic stereotypes. Sorry about that. Our mindsets, the socialization we've got that have been millennia in the making, that men take charge and women take care. And it's amazing. You think, really? Aren't we over that by now? But it's incredibly pervasive in all of us, men and women. And the challenge with that is that leadership is considered an agentic profession. Go into a school last year, ask 15-year-olds to draw a leader. 91% draw men. 15-year-olds today. Because when you think leadership and authority, people are still thinking masculine. So when women become agentic, it's weird for everyone, for the women and the people around them. So this tension is really important for us to understand. And it's not about, people penalizing you because you're a female. It's this tension between our gender roles and our leader roles. So what women confront is this likability, competence tension trade-off that men don't face. So let's just have a look at this. And so when women do become agentic or leader, authority is something that's really important for you to deploy as a leader. How do you do that without getting pushback? You know, it's like men don't have sharp elbows. Women have sharp elbows because they just don't. It just does not fit with, it sort of violates our expectations of how women should be. So, we get that thing, and these are kind of funny, we all know them, but it's worth us understanding, you know, same behaviour, but perceived differently through our gender lens. It's really assertive, she's a bit aggressive. Same behaviour, and data shows exactly the same behaviour is judged differently. He's really confident. She's a bit self-promoting. Who does she think she is? He doesn't suffer fools. She really lost it in that meeting. Anger in particular is one thing that is status enhancing, sprinklings of it, and a man as a leader, it's completely the opposite for a woman. It's completely status diminishing. So we get to that whole thing of, well, what works for men doesn't always work for women in a leadership role. So how do we find a way to be our best leadership self? Sometimes then we say, okay, to be respected, we need to be authoritative and agentic, or we need to be liked. So women will also start talking up like that. So, you know, so there's no threat in me. You don't have to worry about that. We do that pro-social stuff, like volunteering to be helpful. And there is a higher expectation. Women are not only have got a higher level of competence expectation, we have a higher expectation of what they call pro-social behaviour, looking after people. And so that's what we do, because we want to be liked. And then submissive body language becomes very natural. That, you know, that's what across every primate, sad to say, it's called low status behaviour. Making sense, woman. Imagine. And that diminishes authority. But it can come very naturally to us. And we want to be liked. Why wouldn't we be liked? But it is taking away the perception of us as leaders. So this double bind, many of you will be familiar with it. You know, what works for men doesn't necessarily work for women. We've got outdated gender stereotypes deeply embedded in us. So women who appear competent can often not be liked, and women who appear liked can often not be perceived as competent. And yet to be leaders, we need to be both respected and rated and liked. So, what's this double bind? To act authoritative, confident and direct, to be in my leader role, that's being agentic, and I have to be approachable, warm and caring. And sometimes there's a real tension there. Does this make sense to people? You get it? Yeah. And the point of doing this is not, there's no victims in this room. That's completely the opposite. What do we do with it? How do we do with it skillfully? And of course, these are stereotypes. We want to be unpicking. But we know how long that takes. And so we are at that wedge, maybe 2 or 3 generations of us. So how do we do that with skill? How do we take our best leadership selves so that our grandchildren and goddaughters and all the rest will look and go, ah, I can do that. Because there's not many times in my life I thought that. You know, most of the role models out there were people I didn't want to be. I didn't like her, why would I want to be here? Or completely familiar. You know, they looked like they'd just walked off a catwalk and they had 6 children and a millionaire husband and they just looked like they had everything sorted. I couldn't relate to that either. So these things will change, but meanwhile, what do we do about it? So this is a dilemma in essence. It is a dilemma. How do we confront that dilemma and then do something with it? Because that likability, competence piece is a real tension. It's a real tension in us. And the more conscious we can be, then the more self-aware we are, the more skillful we can be. So the bias towards men as leaders is just designed into our organisations and society. It will change, But at the moment we're stuck in this, it's still there. The thing is, it's not men's fault. It's really important that men sitting there and you know, even they don't feel privileged when we use that language around them. They don't feel privileged. They feel actually quite anxious about their role and their place. So the reality is they're not making that trade-off. And as leaders, this is as leaders, their likability and competence. And as I said here, it is not personal. So for us to be really careful about how we look at this tension, this dilemma, objectively and skillfully. And that's what I want to get to. How do we retool with this framework in mind to be our best leadership self? And how do we do that without enraging women? It's not fair. A lot of things in life aren't. Or, you know, getting men very defensive about it. So, the other piece of this is, well, it isn't fair, it's not right. We need to fix the system. Of course we need to fix the system. We need our organisations to be more flexible, to make sure all of the unconscious bias that's in our recruitment and our promotion and our succession planning and our high potential mapping, all of that, and you know, great HR teams working really hard to make sure that the system, the pool we're swimming in is as gender lensed and ungender biased as possible. But we know how long those mountains, we know how long it takes for that organisational change to happen. And meanwhile, what do we do for the women? They're swimming in that pool. You know, and so as my interest is in what do we do for individual women, why we move that mountain. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. How do we take some individual personal responsibility, understanding what's going on out there? I think so again, when I talked before about, there's a bit of a mantra going out there about, when we fix the women and yell at the boys, how do we move into a more nuanced mindset? I think first we've got to say, you know, this is another dilemma. These stereotypes won't change until we've got a critical mass of women being leaderly that becomes more normal. And we know that when we get into situations where men and women and minorities is about 50-50, the salience, as they call it, of gender just falls away. And if there's one woman, and it's very, so their gender becomes very, very noticeable, and so the behaviour around that. So you can understand that classic pyramid where we're all experiencing that, what we call the marzipan layer, that talent-rich group that doesn't go any further. A lot of what's happening is that the salience around gender, as you become more of a minority, actually, the more senior you become, the more you start to experience that. And that's often when women go, it's too hard, or I feel really uncomfortable in this place, or I'm becoming someone that I don't want to become. And when we look at this, okay, so well, you know, adapting to a prevailing culture is challenging. It's exhausting. It takes energy. I'm not swimming in a pool, that's my blood temperature. And then there is the very legitimate questions. Why should I accommodate myself? Am I selling out? Isn't it colluding with the system to say, oh, well, I know the rules of the game, and, you know, why should it be me? It's not fair. And it's not fair. The challenge around staying with that understanding, there is no one out there actively constraining your life or your career. We are all coming to these, and I should say that men and women are equally, you don't get a better deal having a woman boss, even if you're negotiating. Women will penalise other women who negotiate firmly just as much, completely unconsciously, because it's conflicting with the gender role around what is considered appropriate good behaviour for women. So no, it's not fair. However, and things will will shift, but how do we survive? Not only survive, how do we thrive being at the wedge? These 2 or 3 generations where we want, in a few generations' time, people to be going, that's great leadership, and there are a lot of females involved. The problem with the double bind mindset, so everyone says, oh, well, women don't. And I really try to take that out of my lexicon, because it's real, it makes people feel like a victim. It's completely paralyzing. What can you do if you think, oh, well, I can't win? No one wants to play lose-lose. I think it's also really difficult when you hear people talk about, oh, we just need to teach women the rules of the game. My career's never been a game. I don't play games at work. This is serious. I come here to make a difference, and it's hard work. So don't teach me the rules of a game, the rules that are already stacked against me. I don't think this is helpful when we understand the double bind to go into it as a, I can't win. Makes us feel like a failure, which is, takes all of our learning energy away. And it makes us feel like victims. And that just sits with rage and putting our energy into recovering from deficits and syndromes. I don't have syndrome. I am an imposter. I've got to deal with that because I am an imposter. That's why this feels like this. This is why I get backlash. This is why people are sort of surprised. This is why I need to bring agency and warmth to my leadership. But yeah, I don't have syndrome. I don't need fixing. I need to go and get, a male leadership injection. So, but it's interesting to build your mindset around this. And I want to talk about authenticity, because I find this really very prevalent. When we get this paralyzing, I feel like a victim, this isn't fair, it's a double bind, can't win, what we often default to is, well, I can't be my real self here. Because it is very destabilizing of your self-concept when you're in a world where you are a minority and it's not necessarily acknowledged. So I hear a lot of women saying, well, I can't be authentic here, and that's really important to me. So I'm going to step away from this organization, or I'm going to step away from this leadership role. Does this resonate at all with people? That sense of, am I being authentic? Do I belong here? And I guess my concern about that is, what we know is that women, when they are building careers, actually their strategies are quite different to men. Understandably, because they have fewer role models. Men use what we call imitation strategies, which are completely legitimate. All learning requires some form of imitation. So men will sort of try, oh, I like the way you did that, oh, I'll try that jacket on, oh, I'll try that one on. Oh, I like it. So they're looking at other men and copying a bit of this, trying a bit of that. And so their imitation strategies, when you don't have role models out there, women tend to still use that. And this is data that's now 10 years old, but it's been refreshed lately, that even though there are more senior women are still use what we call true to self strategies. What feels right, which is completely legitimate, but it has a risk to it. Because when we do what feels natural, often means we retreat to the familiar. And doing what comes naturally can be a real handbrake on our development. We would never have learned to drive if we just stayed in the space of doing what comes naturally. To be constantly, consciously incompetent, you all know that learning curve. And you'll remember, for those of you who've learned to drive, I mean, that first time, touching that, graunching through the gears, having your father next to you, just about having a heart attack. And then you go through that and then you start to get more confident. Now you probably drive to work, and if you're like me, sometimes think, oh, I can't actually remember how I got here. So it's completely, we are unconsciously competent. So we've gone from being consciously incompetent, like, oh, I don't know how to drive at all, right through to this is now coming naturally. But we had to go through that. So I would just like to plant the seed with you that sometimes our default modes don't serve us well. And when we're in a threatened environment, when we feel other, we can often default to, it's not really me, I don't do that. I will withdraw from that. So learning, as I said, requires us becoming consciously incompetent, and it won't feel natural. The work that Professor Ibarra does at London Business School is very interesting around leadership identity and how you step into that, and how it's very noisy for women to do that with confidence and clarity. So, does that make sense? Authenticity? Just a different lens through which to look at what we naturally do and the label often that we give to defaulting to our modus operandi. So, we know the situation, we know there are real tensions out there. What do we do? How can we get comfortable with our discomfort? How do we do that without it just being exhausting? Let's have a play with the notion of a paradox mindset. Paradox mindset, I believe, will be the most powerful leadership skill in the coming years. We have never lived in a world where paradoxes and tensions and dilemmas proliferate all of our days. There's not an industry, there's not a sector, there's not an organisation I work with that isn't either confronting, conflicting, global, local, bigger goals, fewer resources, social justice, economic efficiency, and just at a time where we also see our leaders jumping onto polarizing, either or, zero-sum games, you lose, I win, I'm right, you're wrong. And certainly what I'm seeing in the organizations I work with, when they're looking for talent, they want people who have a paradox mindset, who can be energized by those tensions. So this is not only really powerful for women in terms of managing their leadership development, it will stand you in great stead. And it would be interesting your experience, Pamela. Some of the headhunters are saying, we don't really know, we can kind of spot it, we don't know how to really assess for it, but it's really critical. People who can hold these tensions and be energized by them. And it's a really powerful way of accepting the fact that you can get comfortable with your discomfort. So if we look at these dilemmas, just as a reminder, I've got to be demanding as a leader, and I've got to be caring. I need to be authoritative to be a respected and native leader, but I've got to, as a woman, be very participative, advocating and yet serving others, self-confident, but only if I'm nice. So what does that look like? I learn by mirroring, we all do, but I don't know who to copy. And I lean in, told to lean in to succeed, and I'm told I have sharp elbows. So these are dilemmas that could be paralyzing, but we're going to say we don't get paralyzed, and we ain't paralyzed. I really like this Nietzsche quote, kind of puts it into context, that it's through the presence of opposites and the feelings they occasion that the great man, the bow with great tension, develops. And I like to plant that seed, that these tensions are huge development opportunities. So how do we reframe to retool with this paradox mindset? This is how we look at these dilemmas. The challenge with paradoxes is that they can be really vicious. And we see that in people polarizing, and we can get trapped in reinforcing things we think we're solving, but then it pops up there somewhere else. So our solving is actually really nominal and very superficial. So paradox thinking is not about duality, it's not about either or, it's not about a zero-sum game. And we can use this notion of paradox as a perspective. So we can start solving for contradictory demands. So a dilemma mindset might be, oh, we've got a problem here, I can see what's facing me, I can't figure this out. Again, it's paralyzing, it's disabling, it's like, oh, I'm just going to have to take a side. A paradox mindset is, there's a problem here, I'm going to refuse a trade-off. I know how to do both and it's learning how to do both and bringing that paradox mindset to dilemmas that's really important. And it is how we view it, as Richard Chate said, you know, our resilience, our being able to get through most often is not about everything that we're doing, but it's actually how we look at the world and how we interpret, therefore, those events. So I'll try and play this out, because sometimes the concept of paradox mindset is like, well, it sounds all right, but still a dilemma. When we're looking at leadership development, what do we all want to be? We want to be our best leadership self. And I absolutely believe that requires us looking out, being very clear about what's happening in the landscape, really reflecting on that, understanding what's going on in my world, and really important that I know what's going on in here. How do I respond to that? My self-awareness will inform my self-management. So do we really know what we're doing here? And if we're looking at what's going on out there, these are some of the things that through your development you will land on. Being aware of the gender dynamics in the working landscape, being really aware of what's going on, skillfully navigating your visibility and your influence, understanding and managing sometimes the ambivalence that people will have about your authority as a woman leader, and being confident of how you bring agency and warmth to your leadership, being able to say I belong in this place, and as a role model I can demonstrate to other diverse groups that they can belong here too. I find comfort in my discomfort because I'm learning, and I'm proud to raise the bar. Why do I say proud to raise the bar? Because again, there's that whole, when do you work through, it's not fair, why me, why should I be putting the effort in? There's lots of times in our lives when we choose to raise the bar. Sometimes in an argument you think, I'm going to let that go. No, I'm going to pick the fights, I'm going to pick the one, you know, the hill that I die on. And if we can change that channel to say, yes, I'm raising the bar, and I'm proud to raise the bar, because that's what's required of me. The same if you're looking at your internal landscape. Again, my self-awareness enables my self-management. So again, I can do this. I can manage the tensions. I can manage the contradictions without diminishing my authenticity and my integrity. I bring agency and warmth to my leadership. I am personally working always on my resilience, and I'm proud that I chose to choose to raise the bar. So the model of what's going on out there, what's going on in here to create my best leadership self, and working on those things all of the time. Shall we have a play? Are you still with me?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, good, good. So, we've done a bit of reflection on what's happening out there in the world. Well-validated data. We've done some reframing around this doesn't make us victims and it doesn't make us failures. Now, what might retooling look like? Because as I say, I'm interested in the mid-source of things. What might we do? Now, normally we would spend half a day on just one of these things, but I'm just going to take four things that, and they're kind of hacks really, that you might want to approach with a paradox mindset and retool. So let's have a look, first of all, at negotiation. The data around negotiation is, sorry, my watch came off today, so I'm having to use my phone to check that. So women are told to negotiate, but women are penalised if they negotiate too hard. So, you know, I often hear people say, oh, she doesn't know when to push and when to stop pushing. Well, I would say it's about how she pushes it, because she knows exactly what she's doing. And again, same behavior, but being judged and perceived and experienced, these are real experiences, differently through the expectation of gender. So men are 4 times more likely than women to negotiate. The world is a really negotiable place for men. You know, it comes very naturally. People expect them to do that. When women do initiate, they are significantly less successful. And women are penalised to a greater degree by looking pushy by both men and women. So the data, there's no difference. So that whole, it's not very nice, is basically a concept and an experience that people will have from both men and women. So women are wary of negotiating. Again, it's no point just giving some, you know, you're missing the point just saying let's give them some negotiation training, because there's a social cost to their negotiating. So you start going, no, it didn't work last time. Oh, I saw what happened to so-and-so when, you know, her reputation, when she went in and did that. There is a social cost, and clearly there is a significant economic cost. So there's, you know, the gender pay gap is a very complex story. But what's really interesting, which is why negotiation training needs to be much more nuanced, women outperform men in representational negotiation significantly. That is when you're negotiating on someone else's behalf. This isn't about skill. You know how to do this. You know really well. It's about why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and how it's being perceived. Because when you know, this is the, get a female lawyer, I tell you, because it's very interesting, substantially, nearly 25% significantly. So this is not about skill. So what's going on? You can do it, but you're less successful and you don't do it so much. Well, we know what's going on. Same behavior, different experience, different feedback. So what do we do? Again, this is about managing this landscape skillfully. It's not about selling out, it's not about colluding, but I know the landscape that I'm in. So what might we do? Again, this is a how. I'm going to really fly through this. We would normally do some practice around this because it can be really fun. Raise your expectations. Sounds really basic. There needs to be some dissatisfaction for you to be fueled, and you need to do your research, especially on the money side. I remember, was it last year when the BBC gender pay gap came out, and I think it was Sarah Montague found out that she was getting paid so much less to the other men on the Today program. And, you know, I think that almost did, I mean, didn't take long for her to be, you know, off that, and she was on the 1 o'clock spot. But her rage was because she had no idea. And so she was okay with her salary. It wasn't like she was okay with it. It was that she had no idea. It was information that she believed she should have had. So do your research. Imagine you're negotiating for someone else. Really interesting. Just have a practice. I really can't tell you how important it is for us to get out of those automatic pilots that aren't necessarily serving us well, because they will, there'll be just new ways of practicing, and we have to be conscious that our default modes as well are part of our socialization. Really interesting if you decide you're, you know, I've got a colleague who literally has a little charity she imagines on her shoulder. But anyway, and she said it just completely changes my approach. Because it's not just about me, and the language she uses is more passionate and more compassionate. It's very interesting. So imagine you're negotiating for someone, contract it out. No, that sounds basic. Put someone between you and that, because then you're not having to manage the relationship and the issue. And I see this when women are negotiating for starting salaries. We often fall too quickly into the relationship. And the men go, oh, I'm shaking on this until I've seen this, right? And they'll push, push, push. So keep someone in the middle for as long as you can. The next one, package it up. I'm going to talk to you a little more about that. Leverage your relationship goals. This is instinctive. You know, we've been talking about win-win negotiation for decades now. But still, most people will go in with a win-lose. You know, don't make it a fight, because you'll lose. Just go in there and leverage that and practice. What do I mean practicing? Next time to the John Lewis counter, practice some of this stuff. In a low-stakes environment where you go, oh, God, that is so embarrassing. Or, you know, it doesn't have to be these big negotiations. Start shifting and changing your channel. So what do I mean by package it up? How we practice our ask. 3 things. And again, really practice and plan for it. Why are you asking? Sounds really basic. But if you go into a negotiation understanding what the benefits to that person is and the benefits to yourself and your organization, that will pervade your language. It just takes the heat out of a lot of the conversations. Do you really know what's in it for them? The second one is really interesting. I see a lot of women when they're negotiating, because it's anxiety provoking, and it is, because it's kind of conflict, and you're never quite sure whether you're going to be successful or not, because you've had a patchy record of people going, who the hell do you think you are? We sort of go through the things that we want, and we tick off the easy ones so we don't get to the big one. It says, oh, by the way, I want another 10,000, or whatever it is, and by the way, I need, absolutely, it's not negotiable, 2 more people on my team. But you've got nothing left to give. You got no gives. And so you got all this little stuff, and the thing you went in for, you've got nowhere to go with. Package it up, use what if, then, if we did that, so you can see the whole, and you are building the ecosystem of being able to do that. Other thing is, for whom are you asking? Be really clear who is benefiting from that. Because again, when you are asking, think about your proposal benefits and be able to always throw that in. Now, we would normally spend a lot of time doing that. These are just hacks. You can get the copies of this, but just have a play with that. What I wanted to just really bring to life in terms of the retooling is not just reframing, we are not victims or failures, but we might just need some hacks around how to do this in a way that makes us more successful. So, negotiating. Let's talk about political savvy. Really important. What do people think of political behaviour? See, organisational politics. What are the words that come to mind? Anyone?
Have negative connotations to the words.
What sort of words would you use, John? Yeah.
If you think it's obvious politics, you might think someone's got sort of connections
Yeah.
you can't access.
So a bit opaque, a bit behind the scenes.
Yeah.
There's an agenda.
There's an agenda.
Divisive.
What was that?
Divisive.
Divisive. Yeah.
Someone has to lose if someone has to win.
Yeah.
That
So it's
kind of-
win-lose.
Yeah.
Anyone else? How would you just? Yeah. Yeah. Well, most of you kind of captured that. Most people, most women, I should say, when you ask this question, kind of come up with this list. And yet, unless we have political savvy, we ain't going to be leaders. And that's a real challenge, because this is very real. Not only are they more promotable, but their careers are not derailed. And often we see women's lack of political savvy completely derailing their careers. They get blindsided, really blindsided. Because if your strategy for promotion or progression is if I just work harder, if I just get better and better at my job. The reality is, you get to a certain level, your technical competence is a given. Keeping, getting better for another 5% is going to do nothing. There's something else that needs to be happening. So just working harder at being competent ain't going to do it. Political savvy is really important. So what I'd like to do, again, it's another paradox. Can leaders really operate with integrity and be politically savvy? Is this another either or that I've got to deal with? How might I approach this tension, it's a paradox, not as a trade-off? Because, all the great thinkers in the world are saying this is a really important, really important. So I'd just like to give you a tool. It certainly was helpful for me in my career. Because political skill becomes more important as we become more senior. And it's about influence. That's how our team and our important stuff happens. If you want to be a change agent, you are going to have to be an influencer. So how do we do it in a way that doesn't, can people think of themselves on this spectrum? Self-serving through to operating with integrity, politically sophisticated through to politically naive. You don't have to say where you are, but yeah? Anyone met Sue the snake in their career? Yeah, I have. Yeah, so no integrity really, and deeply self-serving. So this is just all about me, but you sort of have to kind of vaguely admire the skill, but you don't like it. And you tell yourself, won't last long, your reputation will stink, but either way. Any no idea Nellies? That are just so naive and so unskilled and just annoy you, most people. Worthy Wendy, she is so good, but very lacking in skill and savvy, and so deeply ineffective. And that's the sad thing. Good people who have decided that being politically savvy is either inauthentic or lacking integrity, and they leave their influence and their capability and the difference they can make at the door because they ain't gonna go in that door. And there is a sage Sarah out there. Political skill can be learned, can absolutely be learned. And if you're sitting with that mindset as, where am I on the spectrum? And sometimes these are very difficult, challenging tensions. You've got to sit down with yourself. Am I being Sue the snake, and that's the whole thing. Am I really listening to what's going on inside here? Am I being worthy Wendy because I'm anxious about needing to step into that? Or can I say, this is something I can do with integrity and skill? Because political savvy is just about being deeply curious about where power is in the organisation. Just observe it. We need to notice things so that we can be skillful, really skillful as female leaders to be our best leadership self and make the impact that we want. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
I know it's a skim through, but again, it's just how do we shift our framework? And then you can start playing with this stuff. Okay, where am I sitting? You can observe others. So a deep curiosity about who holds the power, and then exercising your power with skill and integrity. Should we talk about networking? Who loves networking? Definitely hard, definitely. Listen, again, we've talked about this before, and we don't have time to go through all of these. Visibility building, the most important component of progression. Suddenly that gets a stage in your career, and it's not very senior. It's probably your second supervisory role. There goes the T. Is that suddenly the components, the attributes for making you successful in your job are not the same as making you able to progress in your role. And so visibility raising is also looks self-serving, and women are sort of, she's getting a bit up herself. Who she thinks she is. But unless we are visible, and it's a really complex cocktail of competence, leadership, and technical. So this is what's being observed. Because, you know, it's all out there in the ether, but the research shows that these are the four components, this cocktail of competence, your leadership competence, so people want to see you behaving like a leader, and your technical competence. But if you're just doing technical competence, it's not going to be enough, so that people need to observe you being leaderly. And the other component is being rated and liked, competent, likable, rated and liked by senior influential people. Just like, oh God, how do you do that? But visibility is really important, and there's lots of things we would talk about how you do that with integrity, what you volunteer for. You know, you guys probably spend a lot of time on strategy for this organisation and for your other organisation. Thinking about maps, markets, buyers, clients. When's the last time you spent that time on yourself? Being strategic is not about being manipulative or fake. Sponsors, you know, really important, very important. And we know that a lot of people also get, you know, mentoring programs. That's all they're mentoring. All mentoring is not created the same. The data shows that mentoring is a significant predictor of career progression for men. And it's not for women. And we've been digging into that. What is going on? And we know what's going on now. It's because women get mentored and men get sponsored. So again, there's that women often go into it, or men, it's a development conversation. And of course mentoring should be a development conversation. But actually you need someone to be spending their reputational and political capital on you as well. And find it very difficult to do that. Women are perceived as risky. So not all mentoring is created the same. But anyway, we're not talking about that. I want to talk to you about networking as an example of, again, being skillful. Because this is about building your reputation. And of course, the thing is your reputation will get you the job before you do. Who is talking about you? And what are they saying? And that reputation is so powerful, and it is so precious. Don't do it by default. And that doesn't about being fake or manipulative. You know who you are. The clearer you are about your leadership purpose, who you are, then that reputation needs to be spread out. Drop that pebble into the pond. So, yeah, networking. Who likes networking? What do you think when you think of networking?
So awkward.
Awkward, yeah.
Just
Intimidating, yeah.
Networking, if those falls into two completely different camps. If there are people I actually want to meet and talk, then it's really vibrant and exciting. Yeah. If it's everyone has to come to this drinks thing on a Friday night, I'm like, well, I could be spending my time better and I don't want to go. So it feels
really
like there's two really different things.
That's a really good point. Because you know, often when I think of networking, you think, oh, exactly that. You know, standing around with people you don't choose to, you're thinking, God, I could be putting kids to bed, or I could be having 2-for-1 cocktails with my best friend. You know, standing around, talking to boring people, you know, with a glass of warm, bad wine, wondering what you're doing there. And I think a lot of people, and that is the experience. However, it's really important that we move away from this experience, which is the drink session, you know, people just talking about themselves, handing out cards. What is the point of my spending any time here? So why might we do networking? When I looked back really clearly at my career and the things that my network gave me, these are the things that I was able to absolutely demonstrate. Why wouldn't you want to do any of that? Isn't that important for us to do, to contribute? And again, why wouldn't we build our network intentionally and skillfully to deliver that? Because people need you. Even flipping that, like going into a networking thing and saying, instead of, oh God, I'm anxious because no one's going to want to talk to me or anything, it's like, who can I help? Who can I help? Whose advice can I ask? You go in with a different mindset of abundance. I am here to help. And reframe it in terms of, if someone came into your home, it's just kind of like, I'm the host. Just build your host swagger. Someone was standing in the corner, you know, I would never let someone stand in the corner on their own with a glass of wine in my home. I'm going to go and see if they're all right. I'm going to say hi. I'm going to introduce them to someone. Why not? And it builds your confidence, and you're also being observed as someone who is at home with your leader self. Because I'm the host here. I'm the host, and I don't let people be awkward. And I'm managing my own sense of feeling really awkward at the same time. So flip the switch, get your swagger going. I'm going to leave these with you, but I would suggest that, again, to be intentional and skillful, we have to do some work. Being strategic, as I said, does not make a network transactional or manipulative. So audit your network. And these aren't about randomly going to events. This is people. And, you know, my network is, you know, when I look back on it, there's what I call my girl gang, my tribe. There are part of my network is that people I can just go to and download, and they are critical friends, but they are loving critics. Then I'm completely safe with them. And then there are other people who I just learn from. So just go to yourself, those are your network, 6 people. List the strengths and weaknesses of those connections at the core of your network. Sometimes you will notice, likes attract, as we know, which is why it can be more challenging for women to find common ground in men's networks. But be really careful of that ourselves too. Birds of a feather, we end up in our own little echo chamber. And if this networking is about your development, then make sure you're throwing it out there. Again, some more networking action. I'm being very bossy here. These are just tools. Just to be strategic, just to be skillful, just to be thoughtful. So we're not going into autopilot. So political savvy is operating with lack of authenticity, integrity. Networking is a waste of time, it's just gross. And then being skillful about it. Make a list of 5 senior people you need to get to know better. Figure out ways to do that. You've got time, so be strategic about it. I'm conscious of time, and I'd like to have some questions and spend some time with you on that front. Resilience, really important. That we can, you know, when you're at the wedge, when you're at the wedge, it's hard work. It's hard work because we're putting extra energy into it, and we get huge rewards. So who does, you know, looking after ourselves physically as well as mentally? Anyone here do yoga? How's your warrior pose? Good? Anyone relate to this? This is often my warrior pose. One of the things around resilience I think is really important for us to understand as part of that, what's going on is here, is how we manage our thinking in particular. And there are a lot of, everyone has them, thinking areas, cognitive distortions. Some of us are catastrophists, some of us are negative. We have to be very conscious of the negativity bias in humans generally. It was something that, you know, obviously when we were out on the savannah helped us, but actually can be really difficult for us to manage, so the weight of our thinking. So all of these are sort of thinking areas all of us have. So it's good to get to know the distorted lens that we look through, because it will be how we experience the world. But assuming that, and managing our negativity bias, what I certainly find is that the inner critic in women's heads is greater than it is in men's heads. Now, a couple of reasons. It's not certainly anything to do with genetics. That's what happens when you're not in a place that feels 100% where you belong. But also that women do tend to blame themselves and take things in on themselves more. Men are much better at not taking it personally and they are much more Teflon. We are not quite, we're a little more Velcro. And that can be exhausting. It can be absolutely exhausting. So constant rumination is a complete handbrake on our careers. One of these things you might want to think about, and I've just put 3 of these examples up here of how we can retrain our brain. Unrealistic thoughts. Sometimes you have them. Oh my God, that proposal is just going to be a disaster. I've got no time to fit it. So-and-so's going to see it, I'm going to get fired. Well, buddy up with people to start becoming much more aware of your thinking. Well, what's the evidence that that's true, really? Sometimes we get fixated on these unrealistic thoughts. Is there another way to look at the situation? If it were true, really, how bad would it be? So again, this is just an example of how we can start rewiring how we think and becoming really aware of what we are doing to ourselves. And the overthinking, the rumination, again, it's such a waste of time and energy. It's not if it's, worrying isn't bad in itself. Focusing on negative things isn't bad in itself. But let's make sure we're worrying about the right stuff. Does anyone else have this kind of 2 in the morning and you're still going over that same old thing? And really we need to learn to stop doing that because it's exhausting. And it takes, what happens is that we end up missing opportunities because our lens becomes more negative and we can't necessarily see what's there. So it's pretty basic, but you've got to get into the habit. Is there a solution to this problem? Am I really problem solving or am I just in this super rumination? What am I accomplishing by thinking about this? So stopping those thoughts. Stuck beliefs. Again, buddy up with one another. If you've got something you're struggling with, what's going on really? What's going on there? And I was working with this woman, and for her it just came out. You could see that she absolutely believed that this organisation, any organisation, was not going to allow her to, be this, that, and the other. And so even working through this about the rigidity within, what really happened, would you teach this belief to your daughter? And it was just like, oh, no, of course I wouldn't. Well, why are you talking to yourself like that? So again, trying to find a way to shift the things that do not support us well. Negative thinking, I'm just going to leave this up here, but it's a really good exercise. Kind of sounds like, really, why would you do that? Because you need to retrain. What fires together, wires together, and we often get used to going into the negative. What's really important here is, we've got this inner critic chatting away, giving us a hard time. Every now and then you need to get out your inner protector and go, oh, yeah, well, that was just an unskillful mistake. I do so many other things well. We're going to move on now. We are not going to go over and over and over that. The piece about our inner voice, the reason I'm focusing on this component of resilience, is that we really have to make sure that inner voice is on our side, not on our case. And it's very easy for it to be on our case all the time, criticizing us, getting it wrong, going over and over things, going over mistakes. Does this resonate to people? This kind of inner critic, chatting, really important. And we can manage that. We can manage that, but again, it takes practice to be skillful with ourselves because our thoughts feed our emotions. And so we're doing that to ourselves and very often can sabotage ourselves in terms of how we feel on an average day and how we feel about our jobs. So think about those conversations you're having. Let's just wind up here because I'd like to get some conversation going. We've talked about the gender and leader paradox. Well researched, lived, but we need to understand that if we're going to respond confidently. So the likability competence component. So moving from reframing that, moving from this dilemma to a paradox mindset, so we can be able to be skilled enough to make these statements about myself as a female leader. This is not about rules of the game. It's not about making anybody into male clones. Quite the opposite. It's how do I bring that agency and warmth to influence that. The confidence and courage piece I sort of wanted to talk a little bit about, because we talked about what, there's a difference between confidence is knowing you can do something. Courage is about doing something even though in spite of your fears. And the thing that really fuels courage is knowing why you're here. So again, exercise it is. What is your leadership purpose? Is it your Rosetta Stone? Can you keep going back to that? That will give you courage to do new things. That'll give you courage to have that negotiation with skill. So it's not about just blasting in there. This is being skillful. So your leadership best self emerges and your leadership impact is brought to life. So of course we need to change the system. You need to change the system when people are doing fabulous work, conscious bias training, flexible working, all of those things. But that mountain's going to take a while to move. And until then, you can learn to be the river. You can learn to be the river, getting around that mountain, the powerful, sparkling, beautiful river, finding your way to the ocean. Thank you.